Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Welcome in to another edition of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. It's Thursday, November 5th. I appreciate everybody listening in today. Hopefully you guys have had a great week out there. Of course, this past Tuesday was Election Day, so if you're listening to this, I applaud if you went out and did your civic duty by casting your ballot for whichever candidate you think is best suited to ultimately be the next president of the United States. And based on the early returns, as votes are still being calculated as of time of recording here, but it seems to be a record number of participants took place and voted in this general election. So shout out to you guys listening. I know I got my sticker, hashtag I voted. Of course, a lot still to be determined, whether blue or red, wherever you stand. Both teams feeling good, both teams feeling bad. A couple of lawsuits probably coming here in the next 72 hours in regards to some swing states, whether or not votes should count. All of that good stuff that I'm sure you guys are keeping up to date with. But what my job here is today is to kind of take you guys away from that headspace, kind of give you an escape back into sports, back into Major League Baseball, and we got a great show lined up for you today in order to do that. So we're going to be talking about the Gold Glove winners who were recently announced. People really didn't like the timing of the announcement or the show, of course, being the same night as election night. So I would assume the ESPN ratings on the Gold Glove award show were very, very slim compared to those people tuning into ABC, NBC, CNN, Fox, whatever news station you favor. But curious timing for Major League Baseball, releasing these victors on Tuesday night. It's almost like, hey, let's bury this in the news cycle. Nobody will talk about it. Maybe SportsCenter occasionally, maybe Kevin on the GSMC Baseball Podcast. But overall, this isn't going to get a lot of publicity. So, baseball fans out there are kind of going, why would they do that? Why wouldn't they wait till the next day or Thursday to announce it? And I know that date was probably set in stone a long time ago. But Gold Gloves were recently announced, both National League and American League. I'll let you guys know who won those awards if you haven't heard yet, and kind of give a brief thought on each particular player or situation. Then we'll carry forward into the last couple parts of the show here today. We'll be discussing the other end-of-the-year awards, such as Cy Young, MVP, Manager of the Year. Those finalists have recently been announced, so I'll share those with you. And then we'll wrap up the show just having some conversation and my thoughts on news and notes and expectations heading here into the 2020 offseason. So once again, appreciate y'all listening. Let's jump right into it. Let's talk about the American League Gold Glove Award winners. And it was a good year this year to get your first Gold Glove. 7 out of the 9 position winners were first-time winners in regards to their Gold Glove, and then another one was a second-time winner. So a lot of young talent really establishing themselves here on the defensive side of the ball, which, of course, is kind of fascinating because everybody thinks home runs, strikeouts, long ball, scoring, that particular side. But as you're diving into these Gold Glove winners, a lot of them are struggling offensively. And it just goes to show that, you can be of value in a lineup while struggling to hit the ball. Now, of course, you're going to have to be fantastic at defense, which, Gold Glove is the award for the best of the best. So if you're not going to be able to hit, you better be winning Gold Gloves if you want to keep a job for an extended period of time. So in the American League, starting out at first base, finalists were Yuri Gurriel out of Houston, Matt Olson from the Oakland Athletics, and then Evan White out of Seattle. Matt Olson won last year, which was his second, so he currently has 2. But this year's winner was actually Evan White of the Seattle Mariners. And Evan White was the number 17 overall draft pick in 2017. Of course, this was his first career Gold Glove award, but the 24-year-old actually led all American League first basemen with 7 defensive runs saved. That's 2 more than any other player at the position in the American League. And now, what's defensive runs saved, or DRS? You'll hear that throughout today's episode, and it was a big metric into determining ultimately who wins the award. But DRS quantifies a player's entire defensive performance by attempting to measure how many runs a defender saved. It takes into account errors, his range, his outfield arm, double play ability, and it only slightly differs from the ultimate zone rating, which is a different formula utilized as well. So, like the ultimate zone rating, the DSR provides a more in-depth way to evaluate fielders than just some traditional defensive statistics. So, there's a brief definition of DRS, and then, here to kind of further ultimately how these awards were chosen this year. This year's Gold Gloves were based on a collection of defensive metrics known as the SABR Defensive Index, SABR Defensive Index, which combines several methods of estimating defensive performance statistically. And because of Major League Baseball's regional schedule, this season, the managers and coaches did not vote on the awards. So usually a component for Gold Gloves, managers and coaches vote. This year, however, strictly sabermetrics, strictly analytics, so a lot of computer activity determining here who should take home the awards. And first base, like I said, Evan White, it'll be his first Gold Glove. A good thing because I think he hit under 200 on the year, so he really struggled with the bat, but was able to get the job done defensively. And second baseman, your finalists were Danny Mendick of the White Sox, Jonathan Schoop of the Tigers, Nicky Lopez of the Royals, and then Cesar Hernandez of the Indians. Last year it was Yomar Sanchez of the White Sox, so no repeat winner this year, but Cesar Hernandez actually took home the award. And I found this surprising as a Phillies fan. I mean, Cesar, he was always not great defensively. He was average at best. He was average at best at base running, even though he was fast. He didn't hit for a lot of power, which is why they moved on from him. And, Cesar in his debut year with the Indians had his best defensive campaign of his career. I mean, here it is. He finished with 6 defensive runs saved and a career-best .8 defensive WAR. I mean, that is fantastic. For a guy who had struggled, in his past defensively, for him to turn it on and turn it around in Cleveland is pretty impressive. So shout out to Cesar getting it done. And then his double play buddy up the middle here in the American League for Gold Glove winners. J.P. Crawford took home his first award. The other finalists were Carlos Correa and Nico Goodrum for the Tigers. Nowhere to be found this year was Francisco Lindor, who's won 2 in the past. All of these guys were first-time finalists. And and J.P., like I said, took home the award. And J.P., after accounting for -9 defensive runs saved over the past 3 seasons, he racked up a +6 in 2020. That was good for second best out of American League shortstop. So his turnaround going from an average -3 to a +6 is just outstanding. And for the 25-year-old, defense was never the issue. Again, J.P. Crawford, former first-round draft pick of the Phillies. He was touted as the shortstop of the future after Jimmy Rollins left. And then ultimately, we were let down by the offensive skills of JP. He got to Double-A didn't hit in Double-A. They still pushed him to Triple-A. He didn't hit in Triple-A. Now he's up in the bigs. He's struggling to hit the ball a little bit. I know this year he was slightly better offensively, but overall, it's just, man. So if he can win Gold Gloves, because for a guy who doesn't hit and also averages -3 defensive runs saved at the shortstop position, that's typically a quick major league career. So this defensive renaissance here, both by JP and Cesar, may have saved and extended their big league careers moving forward. Rounding out the infield here, third base last year, Matt Chapman won the award. He was up again as a finalist this year. Let's see, Yohan Mancado, Gio Urshela, and then the winner was Isaiah Kiner-Falefa for the Texas Rangers. 2020 was Falefa's first full season as a third baseman. He had bounced around from behind the dish, first base, second base. So very impressive to see what a 25-year-old can do because he ranked among StatCast's top 10 infield defenders by outs above average metric at third base. So he's a first-time winner at third base. Shout out to Isaiah getting it done. So out in left field, this was the only gentleman who won the award multiple times. He is a repeat winner after last year, but Alex Gordon took home his 8th Gold Glove Award. He beat out Gurriel Jr. in Toronto and Kyle Tucker for the Houston Astros. And this is kind of like the icing on the cake for Alex Gordon because he announced his retirement in September. He is done with his playing career. So now that he's gone, he took home his 8th Gold Glove Award, like I said. And let's see here. That is the 4th consecutive Gold Glove. So he won 4 straight from 2011 to 2014, and then 4 straight in 17, 18, 19, and 20. So shout out to Alex Gordon for a fantastic defensive career as he caps off his retirement announcement with a Gold Glove. In center field, Byron Buxton was up against Ramon Laureano as well as Luis Robert. Last year was Kevin Kiermaier for the Rays. Kiermaier had a fantastic year once again. He could be labeled as one of the snubs for the finalist spot there if you talk to enough people. But Luis Robert, ends up taking home the award, and he was tied for the league among center fielders in outs above average at +7. He also racked up a +8 defensive runs saved, and which was third for AL center fielder. So the rookie Robert, he's up for Rookie of the Year. He'll probably fall to the gentleman in Seattle, which we'll get into a bit later about that. But Luis Robert gets his Gold Glove in his first year and goes to show that he's a 5-tool player, not just offense and power, but he's going to have a long career due to his defensive success as well. Out in right field, we had Clint Frazier, Anthony Santander, and Joey Gallo up for the award. Of course, Mookie Betts won last year. He's no longer in the American League, so that made this award up for grabs. And Joey Gallo wins the award, which honestly, it's so surprising to myself. I saw Joey Gallo as a designated hitter, a strikeout machine, a power machine, but, a guy who's just kind of big and lumbers and really wouldn't have success defensively. But Gallo by far had his best defensive season. He led all outfielders with 12 defensive runs saved. There was only one other guy who had more than that, and he's won, how many straight Gold Gloves at third base for the Rockies? So Gallo was fantastic this year, according to DRS, saving 12 runs, which is second, man. That's excellent for Joey. So shout out to Gallo for continuing to work on his defense and improving to the point where he's a well-rounded guy now. So he's not just a designated hitter, and this could extend his career if he looks further and potentially opening up the National League. So the last 2 positions here we have catcher, Yasmani Grandal, James McCann, and Roberto Perez were your finalists. Roberto Perez won last year for the Indians, and he took home the award once again. He had another tremendous year behind the plate. He led all catchers with 6 defensive runs saved, outpacing basically everybody else He had twice as many as the next person, as catchers total paced 30, and he had 6 of them. So he was very much ahead of everybody else in regards to the metrics and what they were looking for. And then lastly, the pitching position, Kenta Maeda, Zach Plesac, and Griffin Canning were up for the award. On last year, it was Mike Leake of Seattle who took home the 2019. But Griffin Canning, earned his first career Gold Glove Award after notching 3 defensive runs saved this season. That was tied for Nathan Eovaldi among AL hurlers, but he also had tremendous fielding metrics and statistics and took home the award for those LA Angels out there. So, again, it was a good year to get your first in the American League. Canning, White, Hernandez, Crawford, Falefa, Robert, and Gallo all got their firsts. Gordon got his 8th after his retirement announcement, and then Roberto Perez won his 2nd for the Cleveland Indians. So not a ton of surprises, a few snubs. If you talk to the Oakland Athletics, they think they got snubbed. The New York Yankees think a couple of their guys got snubbed, but not a ton of pushback or blowback across Major League Baseball in regards to these decisions. So that'll do it here for the first segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. We'll pause now for a word from one of our sponsors and one of our sister shows. But when we come back, we'll talk about the National League. Who were the winners there? Stick around and find out.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA, to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Again, and thanks for listening to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. We got a great show lined up for you guys here today. In the first segment, we talked about the American League, the Gold Glove winners, and how there were a bunch of new faces that were at the party in the American League, and honestly, quite a few surprises based on players' history and players' past. There were a few guys who really improved from one year to the next and decided to take home the award. So shout out to those guys. But here in the National League, here in segment number 2, there are a few more common characters, a few more names who have won the award a couple of times. And honestly, let's see, there were 4 first-time winners out of the 9 in the National League, and there were 7 of those in the American League. So still a bit of a turnover from years past. If you're looking, into the past here, there were a few common names, but some new guys up for the awards here in the National League. So let's dive in. Let's talk about it. Let's start out at first base like we did in the American League, and there's a usual guy there, and that's Anthony Rizzo, who won his 4th award. The other finalists were Brandon Belt, who has never won, and then Paul Goldschmidt, who has won 3 times. And Anthony Rizzo won in 2019 as well, so he remains rock solid defensively, although he did have a down year offensively at the plate, and this is his 3rd straight Gold Glove now. He won in 2018 as well, and then 4 and 5 years. So Anthony Rizzo has always been known as a defensive stud. Of course, his offense has been fantastic as well, so that's why, he's been excellent thus far in Chicago because, let's see, in 2016, he also won Rawlings Platinum Glove Award, which is given to the best overall defender. So out of the Gold Glove, then you get a Platinum Glove, which is being the best of the best. So Anthony Rizzo, he had his option picked up for 2021, by the Chicago Cubs. I talked about it briefly on last episode, but if his name wasn't Anthony Rizzo and they did not win a World Series title with him being one of the heroes, him being one of the faces of the franchise over the past 5, 10, 15 years, however long it's been, or however long you want to call him a face of the franchise. But, if it wasn't all that stuff, I think they would have moved on from that amount of money. I mean, I honestly think they did Anthony Rizzo a solid, because it does seem offensively that he may be losing just a tick on his bat speed and kind of his pitch recognition. But, of course, first base defensively isn't the most difficult position, so he continues to be aggressive and very successful on that side. So, Anthony Rizzo, he wins his fourth, no surprise there. But let's continue around second base. Colton Wong for the St. Louis Cardinals, he wins his second award, his second consecutive award, I should say, back-to-back years. Because he won last year. And let's see, given that his defensive prowess, the 30-year-old continues to be a sought-after free agent this year. So he is a free agent moving into next year, a two-time Gold Glove Award winner. He was able to beat out Adam Frazier of the Pirates and Nico Hoerner of the Cubs. Hoerner, whatever you say out there from whatever part of the country you're from. But Colton Wong at second base, back-to-back Gold Gloves. I think he will be sought after in regards to somebody who's looking for an upgrade there from 2019. So Wong wins his second. As we jump over now to the shortstop position, the three finalists this year, were Miguel Rojas, Dansby Swanson, and Javier Baez. Last year's winner, Nick Ahmed, for the Diamondbacks was not a finalist this year, so somebody was going to win their first award, and this year it was Javi Baez. And Baez continuing to play superb defense this year besides his struggles at the plate, so similar to Anthony Rizzo at first base. So the Cubbies have two Gold Glovers in the infield. Both of them struggled offensively, but they were very good on the defensive side of things. So Javier Baez using StatCast's outs above average metric only trailed Fernando Tatis Jr. for the most in the National League. And then if you switch over to defensive runs saved, he trailed only Dansby Swanson in that metric. So Swanson had the most defensive runs saved, but must have been much lower in StatCast outs above average for Baez to be number 2 in both categories to get the award over Swanson. So it'll be interesting to see what the Cubbies do moving forward. They have all of these guys with 1 year left of arbitration before they hit free agency. Anthony Rizzo, Chris Bryant, Schwarber, Baez, a lot of this core is coming up, or their contracts are coming up at the same time. So the Cubbies are going to have some difficult decisions to make in regards to which one of these cornerstones do they truly feel should be, should continue to be a cornerstone moving forward. So let's see. Jumping over now to third base. This one has been signed, sealed, and delivered for almost about a decade now, as Nolan Arenado wins his 8th straight award. So since the guy has been brought up to the major leagues, he's won 8 straight. Nobody else has won the award. 13, 14, 15, go on, right? This year, the finalists, Brian Anderson and Manny Machado. Now, Machado has a couple of Gold Gloves from his time at shortstop, but now he's a third base finalist. And last year, of course, Arenado was the winner, but his 15 defensive runs saved were 3 more than any other player at the position. So this guy saved 15 runs. The next best third baseman saved 4, is what I'm getting. 5, if it's exactly 3 times. That's just a fascinating number. I mean, the 8 consecutive Gold Gloves marks the second longest streak to start a Major League Baseball career. The only person to ever do it longer was Ichiro Suzuki. He did it for 10 years to start his career coming over from Japan. Arenado's streak is the longest among active players and the third longest all time for a third baseman. So Brooks Robinson did it for 16 years. Wow. But of course, he didn't do it to start his career. So the longest run, Brooks Robinson, 16 years from 1960 to 1975. And then Michael Jack Schmidt did it 9 straight years from from 1976 to 1984. So Nolan Arenado showing his greatness. Obviously, his bat, his offense is fantastic as well. So you're witnessing a five-tool player, one of the best in the sport, and one of the best in the history of the sport. I mean, you're looking at it 8 straight to start. Schmidt went 9 years. Brooks went 16. If Arenado continues to stay healthy, there's no reason to think that this mark of 8 won't continue into 12 or 13 as his career continues to progress here at third base. So 15 defensive runs saved, just fantastic from Nolan Arenado there at third base. And watch his highlights, because the man just puts on a clinic down there at the hot corner. So all you kids listening who think third base is easy, or if you know it's difficult because you play it, either way, watch those highlights, and, man, you'll be impressed. So jumping out now to left field, let's see here. Your finalists were Shogo Akuyama for the Cincinnati Reds. You had David Peralta for the Diamondbacks, who was last year's winner. And then Tyler O'Neill was the third and final finalist. And Tyler O'Neill was the winner for the St. Louis Cardinals. So the Cardinals, 2 winners. That's 2 for the NL Central. The Cubbies, 2 winners. That's 2 for the NL Central. So a lot of good defense being played in the National League Central. And we're going to continue that trend here just a little bit. So Tyler O'Neill, he racked up 9 defensive runs saved in left field, which led all National League left fielders. And, that was good enough to give him the award. So watch his highlights. He made a ton of tremendous plays. But honestly, Tyler O'Neill, that's not one that I picked in regards to my predictions a few episodes ago. Out in center field, Ronald Acuna Jr. for the Braves. Cody Bellinger for the Dodgers in center field this year. He was the winner last year in right field. And let's see, who took home the award? It was Trent Grisham of the San Diego Padres. And this was one of the snubs, or one of the headlines that you can see. How did Cody Bellinger not win this award? He was fantastic again defensively. He showed that in the postseason with multiple tremendous plays, robbing the home run, all of the above. But Trent Grisham, he was very good. I mean, he led all center fielders with 7 defensive runs saved, 7 DRS. He was also tied for 4th among big league outfielders in outs above average. So the guy, according to all defensive metrics, was at the top of his game. Now, the eye test may tell you Bellinger made kind of more Sports Center top 10 stylish plays. But out in San Diego, Grisham was fantastic, and he takes home his first award. Now in right field, this is where Mookie Betts was once again your winner. It was his 5th award. Last year he won in the American League. Now this year he wins in the National League. The other finalists were Jason Hayward, who has won the award 5 times, and Charlie Blackmon, who has yet to go home the winner of the award. Now, Mookie Betts, of course, again, we saw all of his spectacular defense in the postseason. He made a couple of tremendous plays going back on the ball, coming in on the ball. You guys know his arm out there. It's just, this year, let's see, he racked up 11 defensive runs saved this season, which led all NL right fielders. So this guy is just arguably the best player in baseball. You got 1, 2, 3, Trout, Betts, whoever else you want to throw in there, and Mookie Betts continues to be a winner and have a successful career. A couple of World Series, MVP, Gold Gloves. Now, of course, Mike Trout has all the MVPs, all the Gold Gloves. He didn't get one this year, as you guys have heard over the last couple of segments, but, he has a ton in his trophy case at home. But one of them's a World Series winner. One of them has played 3 postseason games and hasn't even won a postseason game. So maybe that's a conversation we'll have in more detail, but Mookie Betts should be the face of baseball after winning the World Series in the city of L.A., and he just kind of continues that mantra with a Gold Glove on top of it once again here for, I believe it's the 5th straight year in the National League. So the last couple of positions here, let's see, we got to go to behind the dish in the National League, where the NL Central shows up once again here. Tucker Barnhart was named the winner. This is his 2nd time winning the award. Let's see, last year it was JT Realmuto for the Phillies. So this year it was between Barnhart, Wilson Contreras, and Jacob Stallings. Tucker Barnhart took the award. He won back in 2017 as well. So this is his second award, like I said, after leading all catchers with 9 defensive runs saved this year. So he had a solid year behind the dish. JT Realmuto did as well, but just not enough to ultimately repeat for the award. And lastly, the pitching. Let's see, we had 2 Cubs nominated and then a Brave, Kyle Hendricks, Alex Mills for the Cubs. However, they fell to Max Fried of the Atlanta Braves, who took home his first Gold Glove award. Not only was he undefeated with a 2.25 ERA, but he also led all pitchers with 5 defensive runs saved. And that was only over the course of 56 innings of work. So watching this guy field bunts, PFPs, everyone who's played knows what that means. For those of you who didn't, it's pitchers fielding practice. They would go into the corner of the outfield, somebody gets a fungo, and you just kind of rip balls back at the pitchers, and you call it pitchers fielding practice. But Max Fried wins the award with 5 defensive runs saved. He takes over for Zach Greinke, who had won his 6th award last year as a member of the Diamondbacks. So not a ton of surprises in the National League. More of the repeat offenders. Anthony Rizzo over there at first. Nolan Arenado over there at third are your standard cast of characters. But everybody else, first-time winners up the middle. Baez, a couple of other guys. Wong, a 2-time winner there at second base. So another good year defensively. But any of these surprise you? I mean, we're going to transition now from Gold Gloves to the other awards at the end of the year. I know I've told you guys who I believe the finalists should be for each award, but they were officially named over the last couple of days, so I'm going to discuss those with you and give my predictions like I did for the Gold Gloves, and I think I hit on a little over, let's say, about 2/3 of my predictions. I mean, there were some surprises that nobody could really have guessed because coaches and managers didn't vote this year, so they went strictly on the metrics, so the name and likeness of the player couldn't be worked in by his fellow managers and coaches and things along those lines. But shout out to all the guys who won the Gold Glove. We'll find out shortly who takes home the Platinum Glove as the best of the best. But honestly, a Gold Glove award, it's fantastic for those guys. So shout out to everybody who won the award. But that'll do it here for the second segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. We'll step aside now for a word from one of our sponsors and one of our sister shows. But when we come back, let's dive into the awards. Stick around, everyone.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. If you guys haven't checked out the other shows within the GSMC Podcast Network, do yourself a favor, check those out. Politics, news, money, relationships, other sports, whatever it is, cars, clothes, I don't know. There's a show for you, and there's an excellent host giving you guys quality content whenever you're looking for it. So if you're a fan of the baseball podcast, take half a step back, just type in GSMC into the search bar, and you'll be directed to a ton of different shows with a ton of great content for you guys out there. But we're continuing our journey across award season here for Major League Baseball, as the finalists have been handed out by the Baseball Writers Association of America, or the BBWAA Awards, which of course are the MVP, Cy Young, Rookie of the Year, and Manager of the Year. Now, these awards, they take place at the conclusion of the regular season. So these do not include postseason stats or games or any of that type of information. But the winners will be announced next Thursday. But I figured I'd talk to you guys here now that the finalists have been determined and are who we thought they would be. But a few surprises, none here in the most valuable player, starting off for the National League. Let's see, we have Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, and Manny Machado up for this award. Betts, of course, won the 2018 American League MVP award. He had an impressive debut season for the Dodgers, hit .292, 16 homers, 10 stolen base. So Betts has received votes in each season since 2015, so not a surprise to see him here at the top of the list once again as well. Freddie Freeman next up, though he's never finished higher than fourth in voting previously. That will probably change this year, as I think he is the leader in the clubhouse. He hit .341 with 13 homers and Major League leading 23 doubles. He also had 53 RBIs and a remarkable 1.102 OPS. So he checked every box offensively this year to finally achieve that award in the National League. And of course, with an early coronavirus positive test, this is also very impressive to see him bounce back and put up these types of numbers here in the 2020 season. And the third guy who was a finalist is Manny Machado. He was, of course, a key cog right in the middle of that offense. He was solid all the way around. He had 16 home runs. He had 6 steals in only 60 games. I mean, that's on pace for 43 homers and 16 steals over 162. He also hit .304, and him along with Fernando Tatis Jr. basically carried the Padres into the postseason, certainly have the future looking extremely bright there in San Diego. As they made moves at the deadline, their pitching going into next year should be fantastic as well, and I think San Diego is certainly set up for success moving forward. So, who wins the award? I still think it's Freddie Freeman. I talked to you guys about that, but Mookie Betts and Manny Machado, certainly good company there with Freddie. In the American League side, the 3 finalists, Jose Abreu, DJ LeMahieu, and Jose Ramirez. I think this one comes down to a battle between Abreu and Ramirez, with ultimately the writers deciding which one they like more. But Abreu, who was the 2014 Rookie of the Year, put together his best offensive season as a big leaguer. He led the American League in hits with 76, slugging percentage at .617. He led the majors in RBIs with 60. He led the majors with total bases with 148. He was second in home runs with 19 across Major League Baseball. So offensively, he was as good as anybody when it came to extra base hits, power numbers. He was good at first base. So, man, 19 homers, 60 RBIs, 76 hits, 148 total bases. I think it's going to be tough to give this award to anybody else in the American League. But DJ LeMahieu, he finished 4th in the AL MVP voting last year with the Yankees, his first season in New York, and he basically outdid himself in 2020. He was your Major League leader in batting average. He hit .364. He was also tops in on-base percentage at .421 and tops at OPS in the American League at 1.011. So for a guy who you don't think of as hitting a lot of home runs, a lot of extra base hits, that's just how good he was offensively with a .364 average, .421 on base, thus an OPS in the 4 digits. But the true competitor to Abreu, I think, in this race is Jose Ramirez. Now, he finished in 3rd place, back-to-back campaigns in 17 and 18, took a step back in 2019. But, of course, right back to the top here in 2020, where he posted a career-best 993 OPS, 17 home runs, 10 stolen bases, numbers that would put him on pace for 45 and 27. He also had an insane September. He carried the Indians down the stretch. If you guys remember, Chicago was at the top there. Cleveland was at the top there. Minnesota was at the top there. All three of those teams jockeying for position. And Jose Ramirez and his offense was really the only reason why Cleveland was able to perform extremely well. So it'll be the difference of Jose Abreu's entire campaign in relationship to, Jose Ramirez in his September, which was fantastic. So I think Abreu's going to win his first award opposite of Freddie Freeman for MVP. Next up here we have the Cy Young Award. Shane Bieber, Kenta Maeda, and Hyun-Jin Ryu are your three finalists. Shout out to Ryu up there in Toronto because after leading the majors with a 2.32 ERA, he finished second in the Cy Young voting last year for the Dodgers. Now, of course, switches leagues, goes over to Toronto, and picked up right where he left off. He went 5-2, 2.69 ERA, career best 9.7 strikeouts. So Ryu was once again spectacular. And here's a guy who's certainly not talked about as one of the best pitchers in baseball, but he's going to have back-to-back top three finishes in Cy Young voting across two different leagues. And that is very, very impressive. Of course, everybody knows the American League's a bit deeper on the offensive side of things than the National League. They have the designated hitter to deal with as opposed to the starting pitcher. So these lineups are a bit deeper. So for him to have success after transitioning leagues, shout out to Ryu, showing he's the real deal and a big reason why Toronto made a postseason push this year. Next, you have Kenta Maeda. The Twins got what they were hoping for with Maeda after they added him from the Dodgers as well. So two previous Dodgers in Maeda and Ryu go to the American League, continue to dial things up, but the kids who replaced them lead to a World Series. So it just goes to show the amount of talent within the Dodgers organization is so high that they can churn out two guys who are going to be top three in Cy Young and still win a World Series. So Maeda was 6-1 with a 2.70 ERA, 80 strikeouts in 66 innings over 11 starts. But of course, everybody knows this is Shane Bieber's award. You know, he's a lock, basically. He took the pitching triple crown. He finished fourth in the Cy Young last year, but this year he's going to be tops after he had the most wins with 8, the lowest ERA at 1.63, and then the most strikeouts with 122. So Shane Bieber going away, but shout out to Maeda and Ryu, who had fantastic years as well. On the National League side of things, it's a little bit closer based on name and reputation, but based on actual performance, I think Trevor Bauer is above and beyond the winner this year. So in third place, in my opinion, the third finisher, Cubs right-hander Yu Darvish. He was nearly unhittable for a stretch there. He went 7-0 with a .98 ERA from July to September. So through the month of August, he was outstanding, and overall he finished with an 8-3 record, 2.01 ERA, which a lot of years would be good enough to win you the Cy Young. However, you're going up against Jacob deGrom, who is going up for his third consecutive NL Cy Young Award. And September 16th against Philadelphia may be the reason why he doesn't win, because he got hit around in that game. But outside of that, he still had a 2.38 ERA, led the NL with 104 strikeouts, but before that game, he had a 1.67 ERA. So, the Phillies there didn't do a lot good this year, but may have cost deGrom the Cy Young, as Trevor Bauer was absolutely fantastic. Of course, he finished 6th in the Cy Young voting in 2018 with the Indians. He took a step back in 2019. He was traded, trying to figure things out, but in 2020, he was everything that he was advertised as. 1.73 ERA, 100 strikeouts in 73 innings. And this man is going to be the top free agent pitcher on the market and is certainly going to be compensated like it here in just a few months. So Trevor Bauer looks to be winning the National League Cy Young. Shane Bieber will take the American League side of things if everything goes as we foresee them. So next up, we have the Rookie of the Year Award. In the National League, the three finalists are Devin Williams out of Milwaukee, Jake Cronenworth in San Diego, and Alec Baum of the Philadelphia Phillies. So Baum is labeled a finalist after a lot of people predicted he would not be. Of course, he's really the only prospect living up to high expectations in Philadelphia. He did not make his debut until August 13th. But since then, slashed .338, 4 home runs, 11 doubles, 23 RBIs in only 44 games. So you type that over, about 4 times, just under, you're looking at 15 home runs, 40 doubles, and 80 RBIs for a kid who's only going to grow into his power, hitting .338. It certainly seems like he's figuring out how to hit at the major league level. Now the next step for Alex Baum will be able to hit for power at the major league level. So he'll get comfortable and he'll start to open things up, but a tremendous rookie campaign for Alec Baum. Next on the list, we have Jake Cronenworth out of San Diego. There was a point this year where he looked like a lock for the award. I mean, the guy was hitting .356 entering September, 16 of 36 hits going for extra bases, but he really struggled down the stretch, and September really hit him hard because he finished with a line of .285, 4 homers and 15 doubles. So Alec Baum's line there may have caught him past Cronenworth. Cronenworth, of course, solidified himself as an everyday second baseman. But did he win the NL Rookie of the Year? I'm not sure, because Williams in Milwaukee, Devin Williams out there, had the most dominant pitch in baseball this year. I mean, the 26-year-old gave up 1 run over 27 innings. So that was good for a .33 ERA while posting a .63 whip, which is walks and hits per innings pitch, and then striking out 53 batters in 27 innings. So he struck out 2 guys an inning and gave up 1 run over the course of 3 baseball games, if you want to spell it out. So Devin Williams is your winner in my book, but Alec Baum, I believe, will be finishing second and overtaking Cronenworth late in the year. Now, on the American League side of things, we got one pitcher, Christian Javier from Houston, Kyle Lewis, outfielder from Seattle, and then Luis Robert, the outfielder from the White Sox. Javier, of course, he was called on after the loss of Garrett Cole and Justin Verlander. So the 23-year-old went 8-2 with a .348 ERA over 10 starts in a solid rookie campaign, and he looks to be in the fix in the rotation moving forward if you're Houston. Next up, you got Kyle Lewis, Seattle's first-round pick in 2016. Burst onto the scene this year. He led all rookies with 11 homers. He had 5 steals and a couple of great plays defensively. And then last up, Luis Robert. Everybody knows, he won a Gold Glove. He signed the big contract. He posted the numbers offensively. Let's see, 10 home runs in 33 games this year. He led all rookies with 31 RBIs, and he was tied with Lewis at the top of in home runs. And ultimately, I think Kyle Lewis is going to be your winner. I think offensively, his year will outlast Luis Robert, although, of course, Luis Robert's a Gold Glove defender, so that'll be a feather in his cap. But Javier, a solid year. I think this one goes to Kyle Lewis in the American League. And the last award to discuss here, we have Manager of the Year. Let's talk about the American League. Kevin Cash in Tampa Bay. Of course, even though all the controversy that happened in the World Series, he had a fantastic year this year in the regular season. Charlie Montoyo in Toronto, and then the recently fired Rick Renteria up for the award as well. So Cash led the Rays to the American League's best record and best winning percentage in franchise history. They made it to the World Series. And then Montoyo in Toronto, this is his second year as a big league manager. They lost 95 games in 2019, and he led them to an over 500 record, their first one since 2016. Even though they had to play in Buffalo, they had no home games. So it was a really big year for Montoyo there in Toronto. And then lastly, Renteria, a 10-win improvement from last year to this year, helped them return to the postseason for the first time since 2008, and after the year parted ways. So I don't get that one in Chicago. Honestly, we talked about Tony La Russa. It goes a little bit deeper there than the surface. So I think Kevin Cash is going to win the award. Of course, the postseason doesn't play into it. So that's where I think Cash is your walkaway winner here. And then lastly, in the National League, we got Don Mattingly of the Marlins versus David Ross of the Cubs and Jace Tinger of the Padres. So Mattingly, 1 year after losing 105 games, led the Marlins to an over 500 record, their first winning record since 2009, and they made their first postseason appearance since 2003. And they did all of this using 61 players and dealing with a COVID-19 outbreak, which I think puts Mattingly as the leader in the clubhouse because, yes, David Ross was in his first year. He helped the Cubs return to the postseason after a down year last year. But honestly, I mean, that's nothing compared to what Mattingly did in Miami. And then Tingler, another first-year manager, of course, San Diego outperformed all expectations out there. But again, the Marlins, ravaged by COVID, 61 guys, and Mattingly takes them to the playoffs. So Don Mattingly in the National League, Kevin Cash in the American League, I believe, are going to be your award winners. But we'll confirm that about a week from now. They will be released next Thursday. We'll probably talk about it on next Sunday's episode. But for now, that'll do it here for the third segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. We'll step aside one last time here for a word from one of our sponsors and one of our sister shows. But when we come back, we'll just wrap it up with some kind of random thoughts, news, notes, rumors, all that type of stuff. So stick around, everyone. We'll be right back.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
Hello and welcome into the fourth and final segment of today's episode of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. For those of you listening, if you're new to the episode, please rate and review the podcast wherever you're listening to this, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play. I know there's plenty of platforms coming up, Pandora, Alexa, whatever it is, wherever you're listening. Please give us a 5-star rating, write a review. That helps us spread the word and continue to show up in Apple Podcasts when people search us. It's easier for us to be exposed to them, so that goes a long way. So please leave a rating, write a review. We very much appreciate it. But here in the fourth segment, honestly, I had a little change of heart in between segments here. I thought to myself, hey, you know what we haven't done in a while is look at the simulations that we used to discuss on a weekly basis prior to baseball actually returning in the month of July. You know, I was looking at stuff, Googling baseball, latest rumors, news, notes, and the simulated search populated into my Google taskbar, and I'm like, oh man, that's right, I should see where those finished because we followed it every week for 2 months. We might as well see where things ended up. And now with Strat-O-Matic, there were two of them, Strat-O-Matic and Baseball Reference. Strat-O-Matic gives us their ultimate standings and then actually runs through the playoffs. I was unable to find a playoff simulation on Baseball Reference, but maybe we'll stumble upon that live here in segment number 4. So Strat-O-Matic, let's go American League East, Tampa, New York, Boston, Toronto, and Baltimore. So Tampa and New York, top 2, of course, everybody knew that, but Boston being ahead of Toronto, and Toronto 22 games under 500, of course, would have been slightly off after the way Toronto played this year. Now, of course, over 162, who knows ultimately how things finish up, but through 60 games, Toronto certainly outperformed the 70 and 92 pace that Strat-O-Matic is laying out for them here. Next in the American League Central, let's see, Minnesota at the top. Okay, not a problem. Few games behind them, the Cleveland Indians. That certainly makes sense. And then in third place, the Chicago White Sox. Now they have them at 74 and 88. And of course, Chicago outperformed all of those metrics. Jose Abreu, Luis Robert, Dallas Keuchel, Lucas Giolito. All of those guys come together for a pretty good ball club there in Chicago. Add in Tony La Russa as the new manager transitioning into 2021. And you certainly have a team that, if this were to happen next year, would be extremely disappointed with an under 500 finish, and I think they'd be disappointed with anything that doesn't end in a American League Central title next year. Would be a disappointment as a White Sox fan. In the AL West, they had Houston at 109-53. So Houston, of course, as we know, they ended up losing Justin Verlander. Now, in this situation, Verlander was available for the entirety of the simulation. And how I know that is because I'll let you know who would have won the awards in this simulation, and his name comes up. So Houston wins the West by 19 games, but Oakland, still a playoff team, and then they were much higher on the Angels than the real world in this instance. So, of course, Tampa, Minnesota, and Houston would have been your three division winners, with the Yankees and the A's facing off in the wild card game, with the Cleveland Indians just missing the postseason by one game on the American League side of things. So let's go through all the way through American League as we jump back and forth. The wild card, New York and Oakland. Strat-O-Matic says Oakland is taking that game. No problem here. Oh, and they even have the boxes on how many games we won. Okay, so let's see. Next up, it would be Houston versus the Yankees and Minnesota versus Tampa Bay. And then ultimately, that says here we're going to get Houston 3-0 and Tampa 3-0, according to Strat-O-Matic, which leads to an American League Championship Series of Houston and Tampa Bay. And that's what the American League Championship Series was in real life. And that was part of the conversation around the the end of baseball there with the Dodgers and Rays is, these were the two best teams. And even though it was 60 games, we had relief pitchers having to face three batters, runners on second base at extra innings, designated hitters in the National League. At the end of the day, baseball kind of stabilized itself and said, hey, these are the two best teams, and they're going to play each other. So Houston ends up just short in real life, but heads to the World Series and wins the American League once again. And if everything went to Strat-O-Matic. So shout out to Houston, and let's transfer now to the National League side of things, starting out with the NL East. Now, this is one that was, we can say, way off, but would have been very, very entertaining. They have the Nationals winning the division at 91-71. The Philadelphia Phillies in second place, a game behind at 90-72. And then the Atlanta Braves in third place at 89-73. So those three teams, Strat-O-Matic was very high on, and Washington and Philadelphia showed that, not the right idea, their supercomputer. So the NL Central, the Chicago Cubs, they win the division, and St. Louis finishes in second place at 86-76. And then out west, the LA Dodgers 112-50. Second place, San Diego 88-74. So this led to a very competitive NL wildcard race. You had the Philadelphia Phillies as the number one wild card, and the Atlanta Braves at number 2. You had San Diego miss the wild card game by one game, and then St. Louis missed by 3. So a very competitive, down the stretch for the National League, as Philadelphia then defeated Atlanta in the wild card game. Man, Strat-O-Matic really had my Phillies get hot, because when we were following week to week, they were way under 500, and I remember being like, yeah, that sounds about right. They stink. Well, apparently they figured things out here. They then go on to face the LA Dodgers, to where LA wins 3-1, but the Phillies were able to win a game there in the second round. The other series between the Nationals and the Cubbies went the distance. It went a full 5 games, with the Nationals ultimately pulling it out, which led to a rematch of Dodgers-Nationals in the NLCS. They had the Dodgers winning in 5 games by 4-1 margin, which led to the World Series of Houston-LA, which, of course, everybody would have loved to have seen, a rematch of 2017. And ultimately, the computer had the Dodgers winning in 5 games. So Dodgers-Astros, according to the Sabermetric smart computers, with the Dodgers winning the World Series, and the Dodgers won. So, Strat-O-Matic all over it. No big deal. But they were way off on all of the major awards. They had the AL MVP as Alex Bregman. The National League MVP is Trevor Story. You had the American League Cy Young, Justin Verlander. The National League Cy Young, Clayton Kershaw. AL Rookie of the Year, Luis Robert. There you go. Pretty close with that one. And then the NL Rookie of the Year, Shogo Akuyama, who had himself a nice season. So Strat-O-Matic had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun looking back and forth. I'm not going to go team by team when it comes to statistics here. So that'll wrap it up for our Strat-O-Matic talk. Let's transfer now over to Baseball Reference and their simulation. So let's see where they had these standings ending up. I know you guys are probably going, what the heck's he talking about simulations for? But honestly, we talked about it every week from March through June. So I figured I might as well wrap up the conversation now that actual baseball is gone. And we got all off season to try to figure out things to talk about. But now we're talking Baseball Reference simulation, American League East. They had the Yankees and Rays, of course. They also had Toronto not faring very well. So both Strat-O-Matic and Baseball Reference a year late in regards to jumping on the Orioles bandwagon because they were, again, very impressive. Or the Blue Jays bandwagon, not the Orioles bandwagon, but the Blue Jays bandwagon. So in the AL Central, we had the Indians outlast the Twins by 1 game in this particular case. The White Sox are a distant third. Once again, both computers had the White Sox in third place at under 500 when they outperformed everything and finished above 500 this year. So that will mix up the algorithm moving into next year, of course, as the teams look to stabilize some things. And let's see. Okay, so that we can get some World Series scores. All right, let's go back, figure it out here. So American League West, we had the Oakland Athletics outlast the Houston Astros. So Baseball Reference was actually on point there when they had Oakland outlasting Houston. But Houston set up to be the wild card team. As the Twins in Houston, they outlast the Tampa Bay Rays. So only one wild card or one playoff team coming out of the American League. That's pretty wild to think about. But let's see if I can... I'm going to go back. Okay, here we go. National League East, the Washington Nationals. Both computers were high on the Nationals this year. That has a lot to do with their pitching staff and what ultimately they thought was Scherzer and Strasburg. And, Strasburg ended up not throwing. There were quite a few injuries, some opt-outs, a couple of people getting old. But the Phillies here finishing in 4th place. This is where they started at Strat-O-Matic, but didn't finish there. So the Braves and the Nationals pretty much a cut above the Mets, Phillies, and Marlins, which sounds about right. Then in the National League Central, you have the Cardinals. They won the division handily over the Brewers. And out west, of course, the Dodgers, they had them winning 121 games, which, of course, would be a major league record at 121-41. Holy cow, for a 747 winning percentage. That is just crazy to think about somebody who could potentially do that. And now I'm going through here. Let's go to October. Let's look at the 5th in regards to Baseball Reference to try to see how they had people faring in the postseason. Try to get you guys a winner here, so to speak. But NLDS, they had the Dodgers and Brewers going at it. So they had the Brewers making the postseason. As I switch dates here once again. Sorry, this is the only way. They don't have a bracket. They had a bracket in Strat-O-Matic. So the Twins beat the Yankees in Game 3. Indians beat the Athletics. So it is looking good. And then ultimately, all right, let's fast forward, see who they have winning the World Series. How's that sound? Let's jump right to October 27th with Baseball Reference and see if we can find ourselves. Nope, no games on the 27th. How about the 26th? If we can find ourselves a winner. There it was, World Series Game 7. And we had the Cleveland Indians defeat the St. Louis Cardinals. Wow, so the Cleveland Indians are going to be your World Series champions, according to Baseball Reference. Man, Strat-O-Matic was, of course, more spot on with Houston, Tampa, and L.A. being 3 out of the last 4. They missed on Washington, but Cleveland and St. Louis, wow, Baseball Reference, a little bit out there when it comes to postseason play. But a few individual statistics. Let's see. Murphy, they had him leading the league in hitting at 330. Let's go to home runs. Let's see if we can see if anybody had a good year. Joey Gallo at 47. They had tops of the list. Juan Soto, 141 RBIs. Wow, that would be a ridiculous amount of RBIs. So let's transition here over to pitchers. Walker Buehler, 228. Kershaw, 236. Your top 2 in ERA, Shane Bieber, 20 wins. So they were all over Shane Bieber having a breakout year this year. They have Giolito tops the strikeout list. Gallegos tops saves with Jansen Chapman behind him. So your standard cast of crew there. But not that really matters, to be honest with you. I just was looking through some things to talk about with you guys, Googling some baseball rumors, who's going to go after Marcell Ozuna. A lot of teams rumored to be after him. The New York Mets are rumored to be basically in on everybody. Anybody who's anybody out there is rumored to be connected to the Mets. New York battle for Real Muto. The Mets could be battling the Phillies. The Yankees could be involved for Real Muto. But then the Mets are also looking at pitching. Does Marcus Stroman accept their $1 million qualifying offer? Or does he not to become a free agent? And if he doesn't, do they then take those resources to possibly go after Yu Darvish, who's still owed a lot of money? And maybe the Mets take on a contract like Craig Kimbrell, because now they have an owner with money, so they can take on money in order to not give up prospects. And then the Cubbies would just be happy with getting rid of the contracts of Darvish and Kimbrell. So that's something that they would look to do, for less prospects type of thing. Ozuna's linked to the Braves, White Sox, Cardinals, Rangers, the Astros looking at him. Guys are still not having their options picked up, more and more free agents. Trevor Bauer rejected the Reds' qualifying offer. So little news and nuggets continue to drop by bit here, but no major news bombs recorded here as of November 6th, and you guys listening to this episode. But that'll do it here for today. I appreciate you guys listening in, as always. I know it's getting tough as we're going back into the off season. No longer have baseball every day to watch. I miss it already. Here as it's not even, 2 weeks out from the end of the postseason. And I'm like, okay, when's pitchers and catchers? That's soon, right? Let's get this thing going again. So I look forward to talking to you guys throughout the offseason. We'll figure out different topics to keep us busy, keep us entertained, and we'll continue to grow the audience as you guys continue to share with your friends. Check out our social media and like, rate, and review the podcast, as I always ask you to do so. But that'll do it for today's episode of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik, as always. If you guys like today's show, rate and review, leave 5 stars. We appreciate it. That'll do it for today. I'll talk to you guys again on Monday. Please enjoy your weekend out there, everybody. Stay safe. I'll talk to you soon.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.